I think class 16, I think we just got a few more. I think we get 20 classes, so just a couple more left. This is technically a two-parter, but I'm going to try my best to go over actually both parts today, so it gives me more time to do more next class. So it says part 1 here, but I've kind of changed my mind. We're going to do the whole chapter 18 today. So many of you, I think, have been liking the videos. The disadvantage is they're old, so some of the stuff is a little outdated and mistyped or whatever else, or it doesn't quite match the textbook, or it doesn't quite match. But overall, I think for concepts, many of you have been liking it. Hopefully, you're reviewing some of these lecture videos as well. But the main thing with chapter 18 is being able to not only in MySQL, like actually write queries, which we didn't do a lot of these relationship stuff in SQL, but we're going to do them in Spring. So Spring's going to do all the magic behind the scenes for us when we're doing our database. So these are relationship models that we need to figure out how to code. So whenever you have tables in a SQL database, each table should be its own object. So I think during the exercise, they're like event. Event is a standalone object, so that's a good one. Category, that's a standalone thing. That's good. Tagging, I don't know if you can hear the dogs as well as I can, but they're super loud right now. So tags, a tag is its own object. So we have several videos that we're able to watch. They did split it up because each video is close to about 15 to 20 minutes long, so they knew that it would take you a little bit longer to get through. Thank you to know, because one of my kids is going to get in trouble after this. On video 1, okay, so first of all, video 1 is separate than video 2 through all the other ones. So video 1 actually has nothing to do with these relationships. It has that abstract entity. The reason why I wanted to highlight it here, if you haven't gotten to like task 2 or so in graded assignment 4, this video is exactly what you need to do for whichever task it is in graded assignment 4. So I think task 1 is just basic setup. I think task 2, we'll look at it here in a little bit, but yeah, that is exactly what you want to do for your stuff. You want to consolidate all of your objects and then pull out the ID and name and or whatever it needs to create an abstract entity. I'm surprised somebody hasn't asked this, so I'm definitely going to go over it. Is this common? And to be honest, in my setting, this is not very common. I have objects as objects, and oftentimes, you know, an ID, everything's going to share. But as you guys have seen, because somebody did post, and one of the questions was, why is my IDs just like incrementing up by so much? And by 50 is a weird number, but like I've even in mind, if I set up this abstract entity, it'd be like 1, 2, then like 7. And it's because every single time you touch that page, it sends in a new event, it sends in a new category, it sends in a new tag. And even if you back out of it, it still has already created that ID because it tried to create a new entity, you just never saved it. So having this abstract entity, that just means that your IDs are going to go up super fast because they're shared amongst all of the entities, where I want my ID for each table to have its own counter per se. Is there a pro and con between them? Probably, just like anything in software engineering, there's always your trade-offs, right? Main reason why I'm calling it out here, though, graded assignment 4 absolutely makes you do that, and you need to do that for graded assignment 4. So watch that video, have your graded assignment 4 right next to you, and whatever it says to do, just do it in your graded assignment 4. And that's one of the tasks done for you. You do have to do that map superclass. I think I called that out last time, but the map superclass, some people forget that. So video 2 is really what gets into it. And all the rest of these are mainly setting up that relationship. And there are 3 different types, but whenever you're coding, one of them can go each way. So there's the one-to-one, which if you reverse that, it's still one-to-one. There's many-to-many, which again, if you reverse that, it's still many-to-many. So those are just their own things. But then the one-to-many can go either way. So that's why they did 2 separate videos. So I'll first talk about the many-to-one. I think I should have replaced this. This second one should have been one-to-many. So the first video was over many-to-one, meaning that whenever you created something, you created your event category, but you never tied your event like on the event category, you never tied that to an event while you're creating your event category. So that was a standalone thing. If it's standalone, you don't have to map it to anything. Whenever we started creating events, though, events needed to have an event category. So once you started tying those together, we actually tied them together on the events, not on the event category. So when we created the events, we had to tie an event category to it. That's where the flow of the relationship started, was when you create an event, you're going to attach a category. And when you think of it, events to category, how do they relate? And many events, I can have 3 or 4, 5, 20 different events all map to one event category. That's okay. So that's where we come up with this many-to-one. And the flow hopefully also makes sense, because that's sometimes the hard part, is like, well, it's a many-to-one, but it's also a one-to-many, and you get confused. So always think of when I'm creating the event, that was the initial topic, was creating the event. I had to tie it to an event category. That was the first time they were tied together, many events to one category. And whenever you did that, you could have just left it right there. You technically, by just that first round, you were still able to create events. You were able to create categories. You were able to create tags. You were even able to do all the stuff from that initial thing, and you never had to map it backwards. And that's fine. Sometimes you don't need to. But then they added one more requirement that they didn't have at the beginning. And they said, well, on event category, not only do I just want to create it and be able to tie it to events, but I want to be able to sort based on that. So once they said, I have an action that I want to go on event category that then has to map back to the events, that's when they're like, okay, now we need to set up this relationship from one to many. So if I never wanted to set up the category sort or category filtering, I didn't have to set the one to many relationship backwards. And again, remember this. Actually, I'm just going to change it. That's driving me nuts. This is going to be a one to many. Okay, so this one to many. So the other question is, could you have done this without setting up the one to many? And you absolutely could have. What you could have done is asked for all the events and then filtered the events based on, and only added them if they were in a certain category. It's one way to do it. Now, of course, that doesn't teach you how to use the one to many annotation. So this is just the other way to do that. So we are now starting to get enough knowledge and enough functionality that there will be multiple ways to handle these. It's just how it's going to be. So get used to being able to think of multiple ways to handle a lot of these situations. Just know that this is a training course that's training you for very specific things. So obviously they're going to highlight certain things over another for learning. Once you get in the real world, they will tell you how they do it. You'll look at other models that have already been done, and as long as you can read them and understand them, you're fine. So hopefully that makes sense, that I didn't technically need the one to many, but whenever I started filtering or sorting, it definitely helped me out, because then it mapped it backwards. So that helps me out. Also, through all of this, there's a couple times whenever you change your models and you change the annotations on the models, whenever you try to rerun it, you get like a SQL error. So I do want to call that out. You might get SQL errors that say, this is the wrong type, or this is the wrong name, or this is the wrong whatever. The fastest way to get over those is just to drop the tables. I think he goes in and shows you kind of what's really going on and how you can like delete a column or add a column or all those things. If you want to just not worry about it, just drop your tables and it'll spin it back up. That's the fastest way. The other thing to do is change the property from update to create. Create, what it does is it every single time you start, it drops all your tables for you and recreates them every time. That also deletes all of your data, so it never keeps the data. So if you're not wanting to type in the same thing over and over again, you don't want to do that one. But for something like this, if you know that you're going to put in random stuff and only one thing just to test, sometimes I actually do, like I did it whenever I was doing this. I change it to create until I get it to a good state that I know I like, and then I change it back to update so it keeps the information. So dropping tables, if you don't know how to drop tables, you definitely need to know how to do that, especially with startup stuff like this. All right, so that's the many-to-one and one-to-many, mapping them. I'll show you in code what that looks like. And then the next one was one-to-one. This one was a little odd for me because, to be honest, the way that they handled one-to-one, I would not have even needed this. Again, they're trying to teach you about one-to-one relationships, but I think the event model, the way they had it, was perfectly fine the way it was. So unless there is a reason that they needed to separate those two objects, I don't understand why they did what they did. Like, there's no reason why they did what they did except for learning purposes. So I want to give a couple examples of when you might use a one-to-one. The biggest one is like the community center that I go to locally. Whenever you set up an account at the local community center, it's a household account. It's not a personal account. So I have to set up me as a household. Now, whether I'm just one person in that household or I do the whole family in that household, the relationship between household, like my household account, and my address is a perfect one-to-one, because if nobody else is going to have my address, and my address should only be linked to one account. So those are a one-to-one. And the reason why you don't just put them all in one table is because there's account information that is account specific, and then my address is my address. And those are two separate entities that people map even in their mind as two separate things, but there is a one-to-one relationship. So I think that is a good maybe mental model to know when you use a one-to-one. Separating out event details from an event, I don't see why you would need to do that. To be honest, I wouldn't have done it. The other one that I'm doing for my project that I'm going to show you is I separated the user from the profile. And I know those are just small little differences, but whenever we get to the authentication stuff and being able to log in, that's a user. So the things I'm storing there is email, username, password. That's the only things I'm storing there. But that has a one-to-one relationship between a profile, which is you as a person, like your first name, last name, those kind of things. So that I am setting up a one-to-one there because my user is for the system, like to log in, where my profile is my personal information. So that's another okay one for a one-to-one. And then the last one is the many-to-many. Here's where I can get on a slight soapbox with how they did it. They did a lot of manual things that Spring can do for me. So I'm going to show you their code, show you how they set up the many-to-many, and it'll hopefully make it so that it's a lot easier whenever you go through this, whether you already have or you do it before next time. It'll help you kind of work through that. But then I'll show you my code for my project that I'm going to show on Thursday, and show you that with certain annotations, I can just map the many-to-many, and I never have to do the weird extra manual stuff that they're doing. So I'll show you both ways today. But many-to-many, the tags and events are perfect. So I think they put in tags. Maybe they didn't, but you guys know what a tag is. So it's like a hashtag, whatever. So whenever you tag an event, you can have multiple. If I'm thinking about events and I'm creating an event, can an event have a tag? Absolutely. Can an event have multiple tags? Yes. And can multiple events have the same tag? And that's yes too. That's where it's a many-to-many. So you're trying to think about that relationship. Many events can have the same many tags, multiple tags. So many-to-many, that's when you set that up. I'm going to go to this picture first, and I'll come back to the other one. So again, these are just pictures of what we've been talking about. They pulled out the event details. Again, I don't know quite why, but they pulled out the event details. And so there is a one-to-one relationship there. Most one-to-one relationships, you can just pull into one object. If they're talking about the same thing, I just make one big object. The one-to-many, if you have events and you have a tag, you can have an event that has this tag, an event that has this tag, but it also has this tag. But this event can have the same tag. So whenever these are, if there's two arrows going from one, and then two arrows going to the same one, that's a many. This one's a many, and then these two make another many. So it's a many-to-many. There's multiple to multiple. Where if you only have two arrows going out, that's a one-to-many. And then this would be a many-to-one. So those are the arrows that you're looking for. So that often what I have people do, if I'm doing mapping of database information to see with relationships, I'm going to have you create actual concrete things like they do here. So a tag of iOS, Spring, Java, and then I'm going to have you create events and ask you to map them. Just possible mappings, like they don't have to be real, just possible mappings. And if you draw two arrows away from one, that's a one-to-many. And if you draw two different arrows to the same object, that's a many-to-one. And so if you have a one-to-many and a many-to-one in the same picture, then it's a many-to-many. So hopefully that makes a little sense. All right, these are the weird vocabulary things that I saw in here that I might want to explain more. I'm going to do the last one first because it's the easiest. We have done the href. Those are links. So you can actually set which URL you want a link to go to. We, before this, have been usually using forms with a post method, and then the action is the URL that we want to go to. And we have to hit a button to do that. So those are the same things. Whether you want it to just be a link, you use the href. If you want it to be a form, you use the method and the action to map it to where you want. But I just wanted to call that out whenever you saw those. Those do the same exact thing. The big difference is the form can actually take information and send it into the form. Where the link, you need to embed the query, like the requirements at the end. So it's going to be /ID. So then it'd be /1. Or you can do the question mark of doing query parameters. So you can do !1 to send in the ID. But you actually have to embed it in the link. Where if you do a form, you have to set up the object type or the fields, and then it'll pass in those fields. They do the same thing. I've seen both of them work perfectly. So it's just up to you. I think the big difference is if you want something that you hit a button that has multiple pieces of information, you go with the form. If it's just like one thing, you might go with the link because it's a little bit lighter code. I'm going to save the optional to last. I think it's already been asked about a little bit. So the next easiest one is Cascade. What this does, we have mapped some of these things in Java. But to map them and fully bind them into SQL, there's a couple different things you can do. First thing, we've talked about foreign keys. Foreign keys join things together so that they can look back and forth at each other and know where to bind. Cascading helps with the actions on that. So the foreign keys bind them together, or a many-to-many table binds those together. So you're using tables and IDs to map to each other. But when you're talking about create, read, update, delete, not mainly the read though, it's more the create, update, and delete. Sometimes you might do something to one of those tables that is mapped to another one. And if I delete something over here, this other thing is now broken. And that's easy to do in a mapping of a table. So the cascade says, hey, look for these things when you do actions. And depending on what type of cascade, if you add it over here, you have to add it over here. Create. If you delete it over here, you have to delete this one as well, whichever one it's tied to. And so that's what the cascade is it's like the action part of, you already mapped the data together, but if you create or update or delete things, do you also want it to affect the other things that they're mapped to? So hopefully that at least somewhat explains the cascade. The @valid in the class. So if I have events and event description, I think is what they call it. When you create an event now and the description is kind of a separate thing, if you want it to validate all the stuff at the the other table, I don't think it's a sub, the other table. So if you're mapping it to another table and you want it to also validate all the entries in the other table, you have to explicitly state in the table that you're originally working with, so event, that's the higher one that we're actually doing, when you mess with this table, validate all the stuff inside that other table. So you have to explicitly state that you want to validate even inside the other table, because it won't do it unless if you tell it to. So when you see the @valid, that's what it's doing inside the class, like the object. Now here's optional. Optional is extremely oversimple, in my opinion. When you do optional, all that means is that you're expecting things to break and that they're gonna have null objects. That's what you're saying. So if I say optional event and I'm then querying the database, what I'm saying is I'm going to query that database, but I don't trust that I'm actually going to get an event back. So what optionals do is it's just a wrapper around your object. It doesn't replace your object. It's a wrapper around your object that says, you know, this thing might not exist. It may come back as null. And if you don't wrap it in optional, then it assumes that an object is there. And so then it can break other things. So what you're doing is Spring has forced you to use this optional wrapper and then right afterwards check, okay, the results of this query, it's supposed to be an event. Did I actually get an event? But you have to manually check it to make sure that it's there. And then if it's there, you handle it one way. If it's not there, you do another. So optional is just a wrapper that allows your code not to break when no results get back to you. Hopefully that makes a little bit more sense. So I'm going to answer a couple questions because I don't have any more slides. Optional. Hopefully I answered some of those. Yes, you could cast, but again, when you cast with a null, other errors are thrown. So the main point of an optional is handling bad data that's coming in. Okay. And then the question, you know, if I do many to one, wouldn't it be smart just to map the one to many? I mean, you can. Again, it's just personal preference. If I know that I just need to go one way, then I'm just going to go one way, and that's how it's going to be. Just extra code, extra stuff that could potentially break also, because every line of code that you put in is a potential thing that can mess up. So it just depends on how you look at it. So I think I answered some of these. So is there another way to explain what setting up relationships between classes actually does? I'm going to try to explain this a little bit more in the actual code. but hopefully I explained the relationships. Now, how that works in the code, I will do during the coding, because you got to tell it how to link. And then I don't know if it's very specific, like 1, 2, 3, and then 51, 52, and then 101, 102. I do not know why that's happening. I do know that they are specifically looking at making sure that no index numbers are the same. So if they go over, I think oftentimes they will do that just to be safe that it's not under. I would be interested to see if maybe it does that as you switch entities, because I'm curious if as an entity they have like their starting. I have no clue. But I do know one thing that I did notice on my end. If I hit the create and then I refresh that page and then I refresh that page, every time I refresh that page, it does another counter. So I would refresh 3 times and then create an event, and that ID was about 3 numbers higher. So every time you do that new event, it creates a new index, even if it doesn't save it. Sorry. I think this is still. I think from the IAs, there were a few groups that was pretty much done with assignment 3. They might need to get that checked off today. That's a perfect timeline to get this thing checked off today. And then graded assignment 4 and everything technically is due Monday the 17th. I will briefly right now talk about graded assignment 4. So again, whenever you're working on your task 1 is just to create a database. To be honest, if you're moving right on pace, that should be pretty easy because you just put in your information there. It does, because there's a test for it, your username and password does have to be these. You can't just make up your own. Normally, I'm fine with you just making up your own, but it has to be those because the test is looking for it. And then remember that you do need to do your SQL task. In your SQL, I'm not pulling up the actual code for this today, but there is a queries.sql. You put your SQL stuff in there. This is what I was talking about. If you can literally just watch that first video of abstract entity and just do that same thing just with this stuff right here, and you'd be done with this task. So if you haven't done it, watch that video and then just do this. And then you have to do the data layer. I don't think I had too many people question about this. Again, with these, it's the same thing. So when it says that you're going to use a one-to-many, what I would do is get your code. That's your coding events code. Let's see if I can. Your coding events code, what you're going to do is you're just going to bring up your models. And if it said one-to-many, I'm going to find my event. Well, this is the many-to-one. So I'm literally just looking at this and copying and pasting a lot of this straight into assignment 4. Assignment 4 is one of the easiest ones, as long as you don't make a minor mistake. It's the easiest. It's very easy to make a minor mistake in there. But I think conceptually, you just do the same exact thing that you do in chapter 18 to assignment 4, and that's it. So please look at these as you do that. Most of you are doing pretty good on that. But get this one good, and then that one's good. So again, one-to-many, that was the main lesson for today. So you should be able to do that one. And then the many-to-many is the next one. And so after you read a little bit more and watch those videos for Thursday, you should be able to do this thing. There's a part of me that would almost suggest doing this along with the videos. Just go ahead and do a graded assignment 4 as you watch the videos. But yep, post questions in Discord whenever you run across them. But I think it's pretty straightforward. And again, Thursday, I will do a full application, and then Monday's authentication. To be honest, next Thursday, I have a concert, so I will not be here. I haven't quite worked out with Jamarco exactly what he wants me to do. I'm tempted on letting you guys have Thursday to yourselves, and then me. You don't need this for the graded assignment, and then I would teach this on the following Monday, is I think what I would do. Because he has that reversed where Thursday we do this, and then Monday it's kind of like a catch-up day. So we might do both, or might do the reverse of that. All right. I'm just going to show you some code here. Here's the good news. If you look over here, do you see how all of these are still white? Meaning I haven't changed them. The only thing I changed was my application properties. And the only thing I made sure I did was I made sure that my URL, username, and password has matched whatever I put in. So some people were saying that like some of this was underscore and some of it was hyphenated. You just need to make sure that this schema name matches whatever's in the database. And then this username and this password matches what's in your database. That's all that matters. And it works. So that's the only thing I changed. Here's the other cool thing. If you go to GitHub, or your Git tab down here, and you clean out, and you get, if you under branch, you don't select it. So these are all the different branches and all the different commits that LaunchCode has put onto this thing. So make sure that you do pull the ones that have all the branches, not just the main branch. What I do is I go to the very top, and I can see that the top branch is the many-to-many features. If you can see that, it says the head, which is the top. It's the top commit. It's not only on my local, but it's also on the origin. But it's many features. Then I can go over here and find that branch over here, and I can check out that branch. This branch has all the good code in it. So if you're wanting to code along, I would not go straight to this branch. But if you're wanting to know why yours doesn't work, this is the branch that you look at. So if I check out this branch, which I already did earlier, I just want to go through their code. The only thing that I changed was my URL, username, and password for my database to make sure that it connected. That's the only thing I changed. Let's look at what they did so that whenever you guys are working, that it would make sense. So they added these tags. So let's go over these tags. Right? They said that they wanted to do a many relationship, and this mapped by. Some people were getting confused on this map by, so hopefully this makes a little sense. You need to find the column, the property, because remember, properties are columns in the SQL database. So the property or column that you want to map to this thing that's in the other class. So the first thing I do is I'm like, okay, so this many-to-many, this is my event, and it's going to be mapping to the tag. So what did I name this? Because sometimes it has an S, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it has an underscore. It might be named slightly different. So I go to the actual model, which is the event. I'm going to control and click here. And I'm going to look at, well, what property? Am I trying to map to the name? No. The event details? No. The event category? No. I'm trying to map to this thing right here. So I'm going to copy this property name right there. And that is what I'm going to put right here. So that's the map part, is I go to the event, and what in this file tells me what a tag is, which it's tags. Now, if you notice, this one also has many-to-many, but it does not say map. Sometimes these will. This is I think why he had to set up the DTO thing here. I'm going to come back to many-to-many because it's the one that you guys haven't really talked about, but I'm just picking on any of these. When we do many-to-one, that's saying many events, because that's the file I am right now. Many events can map to one event category. One-to-one, that's one event, because that's the file that I'm working in right now, maps to event details. And that's where that cascade all is. That means that if I delete an event, it's going to delete the event details that is associated with that event. If I create an event, it's going to create an event details. Okay, so good question while we're at it. If I change something, such as if I change, hold on, well, it doesn't matter. If I change something and then go somewhere and I try to check out, there's this thing here and it says, hey, you've done some things that you have not committed. So these are uncommitted changes. Anytime you have uncommitted changes and you switch between branches, Git is not going to like it. So you need to either one, commit these changes. That's what I would suggest, is just go ahead and commit them. Or the only one that I didn't commit before is this application properties, because it doesn't matter what branch I'm on. I want to keep this. So if you want to keep some of this, you're going to hit Smart Checkout. If you're like, oh, I edited some things, but this thing here was horrible, I don't really want it, I just want to get rid of it, you can do a forced checkout. The forced checkout goes ahead and checks out the new branch, and it does not keep any of your changes. So if you do forced checkout, it's a fresh copy of that branch. Smart checkout, you can actually, it'll give you, and you need to get used to this, this view here, because when you get to your projects, you're going to have merge conflicts. And whenever you have merge conflicts, this is usually what's going to happen. What I generally do is I try to hit this magic button, this magic wand. This magic wand will commit, or it's pretty smart. It usually does it pretty well. And so it did some things down here. I don't know if you saw that. So again, I'm going to do this checkout. I'm going to hit the smart checkout, maybe. No, I just lost it. That's great. Well, that's not good. I forgot what those were. There we go. There you go. Thank you. But I think it's coding events here as well. Something like that. So whenever I do this, and I go back and forth between these things, I'm going to copy this and have it in my clipboard so I don't do that again. So when I do checkout and I hit smart checkout, it's going to give me this. And when I click this icon, it's going to do something. For instance, I think there's like an extra line here. And then also one of these is true and one of them's false. It's going to pull over what it thinks is best, but it still cannot. It says you have this, it has this, and these two are so different that I can't pick one. It's not smart enough to pick which one because it cannot read my mind. So I want to keep this one because this one has my good information. So I can just hit these arrows here and it'll bring that one over here. And then I'm going to hit the X one over here and it's not going to bring it in. Now there's no red and I can hit apply. And then whenever it pulls in, you can see that my application property still has the stuff that I said to bring in. And then I can go back to the many features and it does the same thing because I did not commit it. That's the other thing. To be honest, the way to get around this is just always commit your code when you know it's good. And then you can switch around all you want to. So, anyway. All right, let's go back to some of these easy ones here. So Cascade, hopefully that makes sense to you. You guys already know the validation stuff. But this thing right here, when you put an @valid, so we've had @valid in controllers before, and in the controller it says, hey, go inside this model and anything that you see that's like a not null, that's a size, that's a not blank, make sure that those are valid. When you do it at the controller, it looks inside the model. This one to me, this one is telling me go inside this model and validate these ones. So it's going to look for the size and the not blank. Anytime I save a event, it's going to try to validate the stuff inside there. So you need to put this @valid or else it won't validate the stuff inside there. I think the repositories, this is kind of cool, right? You just do CRUD repository and it does everything for you. It's kind of nice. The controllers. So this is how you, let's go event. So this is the main one. Whenever you create an event, you want to be able to get all your events. And this is where you do those optionals. So they are reusing. They are reusing this display events. This display events, if there is no ID getting passed in, because remember I can do a request parameter. If the category ID is null, it's going to go and find all the events and put those in the events. If there is an ID, so I put in ID of 1, it's going to not do this. It's going to go down here. And because this find by ID is not guaranteed to give you back something, such as what if I put 100 there and I don't have 100 events and there's no ID with 100 events? That's why it has to wrap this optional around there because it does not want to just error out. So it's going to give you, it's either going to give you an event category or it's going to give you a null object. And so then you're going to say, hey, is this result that I got, is it empty? Meaning, did it give me back an event category or is it empty? If it is empty, then I know that the category ID is not good. So I'm going to do this one. If it does have something in there, then I know it returned this. That's why you wrap it right there. So I know that it's going to be an event category. And then I can just add that event, those events that match up to that category in there. This one gets added with the one to many, many to one. Because remember, with the category, we actually want to get the events that are associated with the category. That's where we had to map it backwards so that we can do that. Let me reread these and yeah, so if you had parameters here where you could do the, slash, remember this is not code, this is me just on an events. So if you did / events, and then remember you can do question marks, which are query parameters. And then I would say, this is what the URL coming in would look like. Category ID 2 and what did you say? Type tag ID. This would be the URL. So remember when I said that in your forms you can create links? This is how you would create the link, and you would pass in this and this based on what you clicked, based on what you selected. All of this depends on how you want to handle it. You could do this, display events. You would get all of the events here. You would also this is not amazing code, just think of the logic. So let's say that you had the tag ID as well, right? If you're passing that in, you would do the same thing here. And then what I would do is I would actually save these to a set. That doesn't make sense. Hold on. If the category is null, because you could do category or tag. Anyway, right here, you're getting all the events for the category. What I would do is save that in a set of events. I don't even care if it's a hash set, that doesn't matter. But and then right here, instead of displaying this, I would do so again, this isn't the greatest viewing, but you could do a category, and instead of adding the model attribute here, you would move this out. You would do another one of these for tag. And again, don't add the model attribute. But whenever you do a set, this is a key concept that is very important to kind of know. A set does not allow duplicates in it. So it's a mathematical construct that more or less removes duplicates. It doesn't technically remove them. It doesn't allow you to add duplicates. So if you do this, you can grab all the events from the category. You could also grab all the events from the tags and then put them all into the same set, and it'll have them once and then display the events. I don't know if that kind of helps with that logical exercise there. You don't have to do that for what we're doing here, but whenever you do start thinking about multiple ways to sort and filter, sets are very important. All right. So the other hard part here is whenever you do the is empty chaining, we actually want the event category. If you do is empty here, the result or whatever you're saving is either true or false. It's not the actual event. So this grabs the actual event category, stores it as result, and you can store this as whatever you want to be honest. But the is empty returns true or false. So you could technically do this. The other problem is, well, I guess it's not a problem. You could do it this way and then just do the but you're going to call it again down here. Yeah, you're going to have to call it twice no matter what. If you do it for there, you would do this, and then potentially cast. Actually, you do the .get. Sorry, syntax matters. I always forget which one. So you could do it this way and not do the optional here. So you're checking to see. Well, there's the get name. Yeah. Anyway, I'm doing a lot of copying and pasting. The short story is, if you're going to have to call this same method twice, you might as well just call it once and then use it again. So I think that's this is more preferred right here, because you're only calling this once and then you're just using it once it's in. Yeah, if you're going to do branch stuff, yeah, find somebody. Hi. What else is there? I think most of that you've seen before. Again, I think the hardest part about chapter 18 is you still have to remember all the stuff that you've done for 17, 16, 15, 14, etc. But then you're adding more stuff on top of it. And so you have to realize how to go slow and chunk things. So that is very important, to just go slow, chunk them, do things one at a time. I don't think there's too much else in the actual stuff here that I think is weird, except for this DTO. So I want to explain what they did. Remember that now I'm getting into a point where so somebody asked, assert that. I think assert that is for testing. I think you'd have to bring in a testing class, and so that's not going to work. So whenever we do, I'll bring back the textbook because they actually have some pictures. So on this many-to-many, the only way we can associate these is if we create a table. We need a join table. That's what we're trying to create. And this table allows multiple events to be associated with multiple tags, events and tags. So this is the table that they talk about creating. What's cool is it goes ahead and creates this. You don't have to map too much. But what I'm going to show you slightly different. But once you set up the many-to-many, it kind of links them together. I think the hard part for me with them, let me run and show you. I'm trying to figure out the best way to do this without just explaining in words, because it is very confusing to talk through. Come on, I know you're there. Okay, there we go. The way they architected this, which is not how I would do it, you do have to create some categories to get some categories. You have to create the tags to get tags. But when I create an event, do you see how tags are not in here? So what they have purposely done is made it so that when you create an event, you do not create it with a tag. Once you create the event, so this amazing event, once I click on this, now I can add tags afterwards. Since they did it this way, you cannot you can't add a tag on create. So therefore, what I would do is I would have create a tag goes here, and then I created an action button over here that does like edit, and then I can just add the tags on the edit side of this event. And I'm going to show you that here in a little bit with my app. But because you do not create events with tags and you have to add them later, that's when they came up with this tag DTO, which more or less, this is creating and getting, this is how you're accessing your events and your tags together. So if I go to my event, instead of them doing, they say get tags, instead of them doing a get tags and a set tags, they have an add tags, which they've just broken the norm of the Spring Boot stuff that we've been doing. So they have to do it differently. So whenever I do an add tag, they created this add tag endpoint. Remember, endpoint's like the specific URL that gets me to this spot. So this would be events/add tag. If I look up here, it's hard to see my URL part, but if I go to all events, click on events, and I hit the add tag, this is events/add tag, question mark, event ID of 1. So it's passing in the ID of 1 to know which thing I want to add to. But I'm going to pass in a tag ID, and then it's going to save it to the event. It's going to add it to the event, and then it's going to resave it. So that's the reason they do this. They do it a little differently. So you got to click into the event and then do the add tag. When you delete event, that's a checkbox that I still can't see. That is a checkbox. So if I go here, I hit delete, it won't do anything because I didn't actually delete it. When I click here, even though you can't see that it's checked, and I hit delete, it does delete it. So now I don't have any tags. When I add a tag, it'll do the hashtag. It auto creates the hashtag in front of it. And you can add multiple tags. So this is how they do this. But I don't know if you noticed, they don't have any edits on these. On the other hand, okay, so it's something that they did add. So remember I added the event to the bad event. If I click on bad event, it'll actually list all the events. So how is that invalid? Oh, that's great. Okay, so I have these events, and when I go to categories, now I can hit the bad event, which there's just one. Or if I go to the best event, there should be 2. So there's 2. So that's how they're sorting there. That was the many to one or one to many, right? So there's one event, one category. So this one category actually maps to multiple events. There's 2 of them. But whenever I do event, when I click here, any of these, it only maps to one. It doesn't even show it, does it? That's so crazy. It doesn't even show the category. Great design here. So it only does one category. So this is what they've done. Hopefully I answered any questions you did have, but I'm actually going to shut this down and show you my app. Shut that down. Shut this down. Not coding events. this one. Right. So this is that fitness tracker. I still want to modify a couple things on it before I go over it. But I mean, the big difference here, if you want to do anything different with that many to many, here's what I did. On the tag, I said many to many, and I mapped on tags. That's almost exactly what they did. They used the tags to events mapped by tags, because if I go to my activity, the thing that I'm mapping to is tags. Here's the difference. Instead of forcing some weird join table, I got very specific and I said, hey, I want you to join, and here's the stuff that I want you to do on it. So on this join table, I said, name the table activity tag. So if I go to MySQL Workbench and I go to fitness tracker, even though you can't really see the name, there is a name here that's called activity tag. So I created, that's what creates here. Here's the name of the table. And here is the columns that I want to join. I want to join the activity ID. That's this one, the activity ID right here, this activity ID. And I want to I want to join it with the tag ID. Now, some of you are like, well, why isn't it just ID and ID? This is where Spring gets super smart, but super scary. If you do activity underscore ID, it knows that it's the activity ID. So it just does it. So this is how I set up mine. Join column, profile ID. That's that many to one. I got used to these join columns because they otherwise this would have just been ID. So anyway, it just forces the name of the column. Don't overthink that one. Right. The other thing that I did, remember how we had to go back, and when we clicked on an event, it had to go back and it searched what I'm doing, if I can get the right. I'm going to do the same thing just with tags. And remember that my database has a bunch of random stuff, so I'll make up some good stuff here in a second. So it makes more sense. I don't know why the styling didn't work on that one, but anyway, so I have these things here. If you notice, I didn't have any creates on here. So on the tag, I said add a new tag here, but I also have these actions of edit or delete this tag. So if I said, I don't want it to be good, I want it to be great, it'll change it to great right here. If I want to delete, I just hit this and it knows that it's attached to that. I'm going to switch these to buttons here in a little bit just to make them look better because I like it. But I can add a tag. Remember users and profiles. I've kind of talked about this. My users and profiles are a one-to-one. So if I edit this, it just goes and I can, that's not good. If I add, it goes to it. It'll select my user. So I need to go back and change that. These are small things that I've been figuring out along the way, because on Thursday, I want to show you a near perfect app. But you can add profiles. And so activities, I can edit. Here's where I can actually select multiple tags all at one time. And when I hit save, it actually adds all of these tags to that. Again, I need to probably display that. But when I go to the tags and create on the, click on these, it does the same thing as the category type did on the other one. It just displays those. When I click OK, there's just one. When I click bad, there's just one. I can create when I save this, If I go to tags and I select bad, it shows up in there. It doesn't do the edit delete. Now, the other thing that I had to do that it did not have to do because of this, I actually added an additional query. So I'm going to show you that. On the tags, whenever I click this tag, that's the tag controller because I'm on that page. When I say, hey, pass in the tag ID and get the activities. So this is get activities by tag. There's a couple different things that you can do. First thing that I do, and I don't know if I have a preference or not, instead of doing the optional, which is the find by ID, I do this get reference by ID. There's a pro and con, like pros and cons to this. Whenever I get the reference ID, it assumes that I am actually going to get my object back. So it does not send back an optional, it sends back the object. The problem is, if that ID does not return me an object, it errors out and it shuts down. So the pros and cons are, if I am accessing this URL, this endpoint, based on an ID that I have provided, meaning right here, if I inspect this, I am sending in an ID of 1. Like I am creating that. So I have control over that. Because I have control over that, I feel a little bit more confident that this reference is going to come back with a valid tag. If you are letting the user do it, then it would not come back. So meaning if I do this, I know it's hard to see at the top, but I know that I don't have an ID of 100. So I'm going to put in 110 because I accidentally mistyped again. And I'm going to hit enter. It's not going to send me back. It's not going to help me out and say, hey, that's not a valid ID. It's not going to do that. But I had to manually type that in, and that's the only way to get it to error out. Because if I just go to tags, no matter which of these tags I click, it's always going to give me something good because I am telling it what ID to send in. That is the reason why to do this get reference by ID. On the other hand, so the book, here's what the book would want you to do. They would want you to do the, I wish I could type faster and better. Optional. And I'm hoping, that's when you say optional, you're saying, I'm hoping I get a tag back, and I'm going to say optional tag equals that. This does not error out. No matter what gets returned, whether it's nothing or an actual tag, this will not error out. But then I do have to handle it. So that's where I got to do the if. Optional tag. You can do is empty or is present, depending on if you want to do it either way. So it knows what you're trying to search for. So I can say if it's empty, then you can say, return to tags. I can't remember let's do the redirect to tags. That'll be better. So this is saying if it's empty, I'm just going to redirect back to my tags, and then else, and all this rest of this would be the else. I would do tag equals optional tag dot get. So this is how the book wants you to do it. I suggest just following along with what the book does until you get more comfortable. I'm just letting you know if you see other things, there are other ways to do it. if you see in my comments here, I could do the find by ID and then, or else throw, and then I could actually handle it here. I could probably, I wonder if is it going to error out on me if I do this? Well, first of all, it's not liking all that. So it says throw. I think it wants me to put a tag in there. Anyway, you can see that this is where programming gets weird because you have all of these different options. No. I'd have to play around with it. There's all these different options to do exactly what you want. You'll see multiple different ways of doing the same thing over and over again. So post mapping does not guarantee validity. Again, though, it does go through your stuff for you to then handle some of that and validate it. So it is more likely. It's not always a one size fits all, though. Okay. I like my get reference by ID. That's the one I like. I'm gonna keep that one. Oh, last thing I do want to show you. Something that the book does not talk to you about. These repositories, they've just kept wide open, right? You just make them, their interfaces, most of the stuff's in there. The one that they don't have, and this is crazy to think about, I created this. This is supposed to find, this is my activity repository. That's where I'm at. So it wants to find the activities by if the tags that are in the activity contains this tag. So if I typed in the tag of good, right, we have a tag, but this tag of great. So I'm on my tags, this great tag. What this is saying is if it's going to find by that tag if it was great. I have to pass in a tag. If you notice, I didn't say how to do it. This JPA repository, and the CRUD might do it, but let's see. Does the CRUD repository do this? It might do that. Right. That's a usage. I was trying to get inside. Whenever you pull in these magical repositories, it knows that if you say find by, and then you give it, this has to match the column name. It has to. And then you can say equals, you can say contains, you can query this along. You can say find by, tags and blah, 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 blah. Like you can string along these things. And it is interesting if you ever want to go down that path of you can create your own query strings just by your method names. And Spring JPA maps your method names to a query and writes the query for you. That is something that if I have a little bit more time to look into, I can maybe show you an example of. I forgot the name of it. Spring JPA method naming, method naming strategy. So these are all the different things, is starting with, if you make your method with these things, it'll create the query for you. It really is almost magic. Like, so find by email address and last name. You throw in the email address, you throw in the last name. This writes the query for you. It would write this query. It'd say select you from user. So it'd select the user, where the user's email address equals whatever this is, and the last name equaling this one. It creates this query for you. So it's just something else to kind of think about. You don't need to do that for this book. It doesn't go over that, but it's something I have seen a lot in the real world. In simple queries, we don't write. We make Spring do it for us. Then the question is, well, why do you do that? Why can't you just write it yourself? And you can. I think whenever we get into the user one, it'll actually make us write our own query. But the main reason is what they call SQL injection. It's a security standard. If I can write certain things, I can actually write a SQL command and pass it in as my email address. And then when it runs the internal SQL command, it'll override the external one. And you can actually expose data by SQL injection. If you do this, Spring automatically embeds SQL injection parameters in there so that it won't let a user do that. So for security purposes, that's the main reason why I've seen this. Right. I started going down tangents. This is the app. I'm going to make it look a little bit better, but this is the app that I'm going to show off on Thursday on how I made. And then I'll also get a YouTube video up of it. I might start some of the YouTube things. I'm going to try to get my son to edit for me, but